thanks so much for agreeing to do this and to share just a little bit about your lives and your lives in the church and your faith. And I think that we will be very glad and encouraged by hearing what you have to say. And I think it'd be fun just to start by asking a little bit about your life growing up. Bill, do you want to go first?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Well, I was the sixth generation to be baptized in the church, so that it was a long family history of having been in the church. And so I grew up in the church and grew up in that period of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, in which the sanctuary was full of worshipers on Sunday morning, and on the Easter and Christmas services, there was the doors behind the choir loft were had the ability to be opened, and so people would sit in what was then the room behind the sanctuary for overflow, so that we were used to having a full sanctuary during that period. And essentially the church then was, as it had been during our adult life, really the social center as well as a worship center of my family. And my father was an elder, and so it was just routine church on Sunday and often on Wednesday evenings. And then in the youth program, there were of course, obviously all the Sunday school classes for children, and they were all handled by the lay persons. There were no staff people. That there was a Sabbath school superintendent and teachers, and then there were youth groups on Sunday evening, one for what was then called junior high, now called middle school, and one for the high schoolers. So that was a basis of that were led by and run by the kids, with adult moderators, you might say, supervisors there, but they did not really take part. They just simply observed as the kids led the programs on Sunday evening.
Do you remember taking part in that?
Yeah, I was active in right through all the 6 years of middle school and high school. Yes, very active in it.
Were you one of the leaders?
Well, there weren't leaders in the real sense of the word. It was to some degree the adult couple. It was a couple usually who handled it, and they kind of guided us. But the kids really led the discussion and on various subjects during that period. That was the basis of faith, and of course I attended the confirmation class and gave my life to Christ as a result of that confirmation class when I was 12 years old in 1938.
In 1938.
So I guess I'm the oldest member, or the longest member, however you want to put it, of the congregation.
Yes, I think you are.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's quite an honor.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
That's you get for living that long.
So the sixth generation is quite a long time. That means that
Yes.
how many, so it would have been your great, great, great Oh, great.
I
Great.
think five, yeah, I think five.
Five.
Five great-grandfathers.
Five
yeah.
greats. Did they always live there at the Gilfillan farm?
Yeah, I
Your
did not
family?
live there. I did not live there. There were, of the original Gilfillan had it got a land grant, paid for a land grant of some 400 acres that ran from Fort Koch Road to beyond where basically St. Clair Country Club is. And he had two sons, and my son took the southern portion and the other took the northern portion. And so I did not live there. I grew up on some property that had been apparently purchased by my grandfather, and in Mount Lebanon. So that I grew up there and went to Mount Lebanon High School.
What's your favorite memory of church growing up?
Well, I grew up during the Dr. McCown era. He was the pastor there for most of my childhood and youth. And he also handled the confirmation class, interestingly, as a pastor. And so he was a real influence, of course. And then basically family influence, I would say, as far as the faith walk was concerned. Sunday was for resting and not activities. And then, of course, in that period, stores were generally not open on Sunday, so that you didn't have the any desire. There was no need to go to the store because they weren't open.
Did your family have any Sunday traditions?
Not really, just basically not doing anything, resting.
Okay.
And
Sounds like it was a real Sabbath.
a real Sabbath, yes.
All day.
Well, you were in Sunday school and worship service for the mornings, and so it was really the afternoon and evenings, with family.
What were your favorite activities growing up?
Well, playing some sports, not any organized sports, but disorganized sports, I would say, were with the neighborhood kids. And then you look forward to Sunday school and church, really. I mean, that was
You looked forward to it.
yeah, it was let's say the pinnacle of the week to be. That's and then of course obviously you had schoolwork, and Mount Lebanon was even then was a fairly strong school district as far as level of education was concerned.
And then after high school, you started in college.
Well, that's an interesting story. And I was in high school during World War II, in the beginning of World War II, and then when you turned 18, you were drafted within 3 months of turning 18. But in my senior year, I was still 17 when they were interested in getting as many engineers and scientists as possible. So about 10 or 12 of us at Mount Lebanon left the high school early. The high school provided night school for just the basics, English, science, and night school. So we left, and I went then to what was then Carnegie Tech. During that summer, they were running 3 semesters a year for engineers and scientists, and so I went and I was able to complete my freshman year just at the time I was 18. So I turned 18 and finished my freshman year, and then was drafted into the service, into the Army, and spent 2.5 years in the service. And that probably helped me to be assigned in the service to a bridge building company, which was really formed so that they could cross the Rhine River after the invasion of Germany, because they knew that the Germans would destroy all the bridges, which they did except for one at Remagen.
And that was one of the bridges that you built?
No, we built pontoon bridges. There were treads on steel treads on pontoons. You blew up with air and floated in the river.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you helped design?
No, we didn't design them. That's what we built.
You built those?
We built them,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, over the Rhine River, and a lot of other smaller rivers. Yes.
During the war, do you remember your faith, drawing on your faith to help you during that time?
Yes, because you never knew what the next minute or the next day would bring. Yeah, it was, and yet it didn't seem to be a concern it didn't seem to be a concern at that point. You were there, and you did your job. And we were well trained for it, and we did it.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
So that's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you were there for 2.5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I got out in May of '46, and we'll get into when we met later.
Okay. Well, let's ask Carol. So,
Go.
Carol, yes, do you want to tell us about your growing up years?
Well, to begin with, my grandmother lived with us, my mother's mother, and she had been married to a Christian minister. So we were living in Mount Lebanon. Well, nothing would do, but we have to find a Christian church to go to. So the only one around was the East End Christian Church with Dr. Ewers. I even remember his name, the minister. So we went out there, drove from Mount Lebanon to East End. I hated going because we were always late because it took too long to drive all that distance, and I didn't know anybody. And I assume I was in a confirmation class because I was totally immersed in baptism. We put on a white robe, and we were immersed. And pretty soon after that, I said to my parents, I'm not going to go out there anymore. I don't know anybody. We're always late. I want to go to Beverly Heights Church where I know people, my friends are. Mm-hmm. So that we finally did do that against my grandmother's best wishes, but she went along with us anyway. So we went to Beverly Heights, and I sang in the choir. I remember marching down the main aisle, and we always sang "Holy, Holy, Holy" was the processional hymn. I don't remember too much about Sunday school. I know we went to Sunday school, and I remember one of our teachers gave us little, I guess for memorizing scripture, gave us little wooden plaques of pictures, and I don't even know what the pictures were of. I don't remember. I just remember she would give us, and I had a whole bunch of them. Whatever happened to them. And I don't, there must, Pioneers was a youth group, and I could remember going to that. It must have been in junior high. High school, I have no recollection of a youth group. I may have gone, but I don't remember anything about it. But we always went to Sunday school and a church, so it was just a way of life. I had no second birth or anything like that. Just, it was part of life. What else?
So when you were immersed in baptism, that means to me that you were probably of an age where you knew what you were doing and you made a statement of faith.
Well, I assume so. I don't really remember that. I remember wearing a white robe, and there was
Like a little pool.
yeah,
Yeah.
and just being dipped, and that's all I remember about it. And I assume I was 12, because that's when you would have that done.
Probably.
And I say soon after that we quit going to the East End.
So your grandfather then he was a Christian minister. What kind of Christian church was that again?
I have no idea. He was no longer living.
Oh,
I never
yeah.
knew
Okay.
him.
Okay.
I just knew that she was married to a Christian minister. That's all I know.
And that they had a particular kind of denomination that practiced those things, and the nearest church was in East Liberty.
I'm sorry, what?
No, they had a different way of worshiping,
Oh.
and that church was, the closest one was in East Liberty.
I think that was the only
Yeah.
Christian church around. That's why we went there. But I don't remember anything. Well, I think we had communion every Sunday. I do remember that. It was quite a big, old, dark sanctuary. I remember. But communion every Sunday. That was the thing. So.
What kind of things did you like to do when you were growing up?
Well, in our neighborhood, there were no girls. They were all boys. And so I played with the boys, and we played cars and made roads in the dirt. I remember that. Played kick the can on the street and things like that.
Which street was that you grew up on?
We lived on Miami, which is directly across from the Mount Lebanon High School, until I was going to 10th grade, which would have been so convenient, because that would have been my first year at high school. We moved clear out to Rockwood, which was the last street off Hoodridge.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So we had one of the fathers, there were 3 of us girls, and one of the fathers always took us to high school. We had a nice walk home, which was all right. Or we walked up street to Dutz to get a nickel cupcake to eat on the way home.
And where was Dutz?
That was a Dutz up on Washington Road.
Okay.
It's funny the things you do remember and what you don't remember. But I guess in high school I made posters. And I think I drew some cartoons and things for the Lebanon Lantern, which was the paper. So I always sort of dabbled in art and went to the Pittsburgh Art Institute on Saturday mornings for a while, a couple of years.
And then after high school, what did you do after high school?
Well, I went to what was then Beaver College outside of Philadelphia, which was a girls' school. 600 women of us were there. which is now Arcadia University, and it's about 3 times the size, and it's also co-ed. And our friend, we lived in a suite. There were 6 of us, and we remained very close friends, the gals. And Bill would come down, and he knew the other gals' boyfriends, who they all married.
Oh,
So we had a nice group, and there's only my roommate and myself who were alive of that group, of the 6 of us.
what did you study?
My major was fashion illustration, which was at that time the newspapers, instead of photographs, had drawings of the fashions. And I was, after we were married, right after we were married, I kept applying for jobs, and I had a job at Kaufman's to model the clothes for the artists and learn how they wanted the work done. Well, the first day that I was to go to work, there was a big strike. It was either steel or coal, and they said, "We're sorry, we're not hiring anybody." So I never really worked.
Oh, no.
And so I didn't have my own Social Security, no
Oh,
job.
Oh,
So I just have learned and done things in art all my life, mostly on my own. So,
and you're really accomplished. And I don't know if they know it, but we still use your pen and ink drawing of the church
yeah,
on our church's stationery.
yeah, I like that.
And it's beautiful.
I'm glad you do that, have that.
It's beautiful.
I didn't know that was hers.
It is.
Yeah,
Wow.
On the notes that we use.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's nice.
Well, how about let's talk about when you met. I know you've told me the story before, but I think it's fun.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
this summer after my freshman year at college, Bill was working. I had some girls over to the house, and his sister was one of them. She was in my class in high school, Jean Gilfillan. And Bill dropped her off, didn't come in, but dropped her off. And then when he came to pick her up, he came in with a friend. He had a friend with him, and they came in. And that was the first time I ever knew him. I didn't know him in high school at all, even though he was just 2 years ahead of me. And his sister being a friend, it's funny that I never knew him, never ran into him at all. So I will say he never left after he came in.
He never left. Is that the way it was, Bill?
Well, we met, and I thought, well, she's an attractive young lady, and I think I'll ask her for a date. So, big deal. Bill, he asked her for a date to go see the Mount Lebanon fireworks. That's our first date. But so that was the beginning of our relationship. You know.
Of 75 years.
Yeah.
And you just celebrated your 75th anniversary this past
Right.
June.
75th wedding anniversary. Yes.
Right. So, well, in our life, it continued at church.
Well,
We were married at Beverly Heights, but as soon as we were married, I joined our church. And our friends were all the Buseys, the Mulveys, the Campbells, the Millers, the Clemenses, all friends at church. And we had a bridge club of 6 couples, 6 couples. We'd have dinner, but our friends were all moved from church. From the Forum was the youth group, and had
No, that was
picnics
70
in Mount
that was-
Lebanon Park and
that was
corn
79ers,
roasts.
you know. Well, after there was a there was a young adult group called Forum at the church at that time, which of course was, for those of us in the service, we were gone. I mean, until we were 20 or 21, so at least I was almost 21 when I got out of the service. So that, and then went back to Carnegie Tech, and they were still going 3 semesters a year, so I graduated in September of '48. But when my first met Carol was a couple of months after I'd come out of the service in 1946. And so we were married, and then they had the young couples, the guys that had come back from the service. Well, first of all, during that period of the World War II, there were no young men around. I mean, they were all in the service. There weren't any young men. I came back on furlough, and none of my friends were around. So when the young people came back, they formed a couples class. At that point in time, there was a men's Bible class, and there were 3 women's Sunday school classes. The men's class. And the young couples formed, and that came to be a very large issue, because we were not going into the men's Bible class. The women were not going into the women's classes, and they were very upset about that.
Oh,
So that's the origin of the 79ers.
how about
The
that?
name 79ers, because they came up with the idea that when the combined ages of the couple were 79, they would leave the 79ers class and go to the end of the other classes, into the men's class or the women's classes. Well, of course, when the people became 79, the 79ers class was so dominant.
That didn't happen, did it?
With,
Nobody left.
No,
Nobody
nobody left.
No.
It never
It changed
happened.
the whole concept changed, and the other classes were still in existence, but the change never happened. So the 79ers class became by far the dominant Sunday school class of probably 150 members. And then later, then the Lamplighters was formed of the younger people as the 79ers grew older. And so basically, when I say dominant, most of the officers of the church were members of the 79ers class. And I served as initially a deacon, and then several terms as trustee, several terms as an elder. And I'm still on the session finance committee committee.
Right, I think they come out here, don't they? Don't you
And
have the
they come
meetings out
They
here?
come out here, graciously come out here, so I don't have to travel, because I can't drive with it. Can't drive at night anymore because the Bureau of Motor Vehicles decided in their great wisdom that anybody over 90 should not drive at night. And so they come out here and meet. Or we Zoom. We've got a Dale Ostergaard as a chair, and he's called for a Zoom meeting. He's asking us when we're available sometime this month. And so I still participate in that, and as I, up until the point where I just finally didn't feel like it's continue, I led that senior men's group that met on Thursday, now I think meets on Tuesday, does meet
Tuesday.
on Tuesday. I led that group for about 25 years.
That's a long time, and they missed having you there.
Yeah. And I miss being there, but I just don't have the energy. It's unfortunately, but that's what happens when you get old. As you folks will find out.
Yeah. What are some of your best memories of the church?
Well, I think the 79ers group, or the 79ers had a social monthly, which was a covered dish dinner and then a program of some nature, some with outside entertainment and others with the. So I think that was a focal point of both the Sunday school class, and we had some very good teachers of that class, and then the social, and as I say, our small group of best friends of 12, of 11, 12, of 10 other people were all members of 79ers in the church. So we met as that group once a month, as Carol said, and had dinner. It rotated around the various homes and of the group, and every month. And then in the summer we had picnics with all the kids. So the kids all
That's fun.
Kids all got to know each other. So
I remember working in the baby care room. They used to have a nurse that was, and I can't think of her name. I can see her, can't think of her name. She was such a nice gal, and there were a lot of babies.
well, that was part
And
of
we
the
would
baby,
take turns
part of the baby
helping
boomer.
out, taking care of them. So on Sunday morning during church, during this service.
Mm-hmm.
So
And then we also worked on Wednesday evening. They had what originally was called Release Time Religious Education.
oh yeah.
It got to the point in the public schools where they began to say, they really wanted to separate the public schools and religion. And at that point, then they said on Wednesday they would release the children early so that they could go to, if they desired, to go to a church-sponsored classes or whatever the church itself wanted to have. So we worked in the kitchen for
Years.
I don't know how many years on to
What was
prepare.
it called? It became family night, but it
Yeah.
wasn't family night when we were. What did they call
Well, they're
that?
back again with the Wednesday, but it's a family thing, and it was the families were the parents were invited and came for the dinner, so it was both the children and the parents.
No, when we first did it, it was just the kids.
Well, yeah, once children, then they started to bring the
Then
family
they
in.
changed it to the family night.
Yes. As we said, it was called Youth Club,
Yeah.
and we worked to prepare the dinner for the kids, and then ultimately they invited the parents if they wanted to come, and many of them did. So the children went through some activities to burn off the energy, and then they had
They had a craft class, or usually
class,
made
and then,
something.
and then some religious, some biblical sourced training and education, really religious education for the kids, because that's what and I think we worked there almost until we came here.
And when did you come here?
In
2009.
And so where was your house in Mount Lebanon that you
No, it
moved?
was in Bethel Park.
Oh, it was in Bethel Park?
We
Okay.
lived there for 44
And
years.
so you raised your girls in Bethel Park.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then you moved here in 2009.
No.
And there were a lot of church friends here, weren't there? I
There
mean,
were. Well, there were several, yes, at that time, yes.
The Ockenhiles and the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary Lou Oberlin,
Mary Lou.
the Blackas.
And the man, I can't think of his name, that was not here very long. What was his name?
Yes. Anyway,
Well, the Shriners, were the Shriners here? Did Bryson?
no, they had,
No?
he was deceased before we
Yeah,
came.
they had
Oh.
gone. I
Oh.
think Bryson was one of the first.
He was. Bryson
guess he
one
was
of the
the-
first
one of the
residents here.
first
Yeah. and
residents.
He had
And-
passed away,
And involved in getting it started.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Jean wasn't here. They were both gone, I
Okay.
guess.
So what about you, how your faith has played in your life? Have you seen God at work in your life?
Yes, in personal decisions and business decisions, yes, absolutely. That is a base, a resource, really, in decision making.
And how does that work, like in a practical sense? Like how have you put that into practice?
Well,
Like,
is it a right or wrong decision?
Mhm.
And just all the principles that, you might say that we grew up just were, you might say that you learned through that became really a background, a can't think of the word that I want, but anyway.
Like a foundation?
Foundation, that's it, yeah, a foundation for how you lived, how we lived.
I can remember saying, thank you, God, lots of times.
Yes.
For operations, different things that have gone on. Thank you, God, for taking care of us.
Yes, we've had let's say we've had a very smooth marriage. No real issues, no real problems. And children that remain and grandchildren remain married. So
Yeah,
no
divorces.
issues there. There are no issues there that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And
Those things are a lot to be grateful for,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Our children are all retired,
Yeah.
except the ones that are in who now that went into the maple syrup business, as you've heard about.
Well, they were retired
They
from
were
their
retired.
jobs,
They retired
but
and decided to go into maple
they're
syrup business.
working very hard now.
Yeah.
So,
So how would you say that following Jesus, being a disciple of Jesus, has impacted your life?
Well, it impacts almost everything you do, everything we do. Yes, everything we do. Because you have those, you don't always recognize them, but you have those day-to-day or minute-to-minute decisions. How you treat other people, how you deal with them, how you deal with issues that come up, problems that come up. It becomes a part of that, and it's inbred, really, I think.
Because
I think it's just, he's always been there, because the way we grew up through Sunday school and church, I mean, just there, he's there.
so many people now do not have that. So many people
Yes,
are not
that's
raised
really-
in the church. They're not raised knowing about Jesus even. And they're not raised with biblical principles. So if somebody asked you why Jesus is important, what would you say?
Well, as I said, I think that's an important way that you live, and I don't know what the person would do in some situations when they were faced with a difficult moral decision. Without that guidance, what their decision would be. I can't relate to that, really, I guess.
Yeah.
That doesn't say that you don't make bad decisions or decisions that you wish you had done differently, or sometimes how you dealt with someone, how you might, after you think about it, how you might have dealt better with them. But you realize that. And I would suspect a person without the faith would not realize that. It would just be, what's best for me, and what's advantageous for me,
Right.
what's beneficial for me, rather than the other outlook of treating others as you would like to.
And the people that we grew up with, that were our friends, all felt the
Yeah.
same way. I
Yeah.
mean, you know,
It was a lifestyle.
yeah.
It was a lifestyle.
We didn't really know people that got divorced or did bad things or, yeah. Guess it was
Well,
like
I
living
wouldn't
in
say
a
we know,
little
we know
cocoon.
them, we know of them, yes, we know of them, obviously. And of course, in business, that would be even more so. Of how you dealt with your fellow employees and those people who worked for you and those who you worked for.
Sounds like that every aspect of your life has been shaped by Jesus and his teachings.
Yeah.
Just in your dealings, just
Yeah.
your life.
Yeah.
So if you had a suggestion for the church going forward, what would you like to see the church doing in order to help people follow Jesus?
It seems to me like they're doing everything they can do
Yeah.
with a good staff.
Yeah, the key is to get committed members, and that is in today's environment, that is telling the brand as part of the evangelism aspect. It's got to be very difficult. As I said before, when growing up, as I remember back in the 30s and 40s, of course I wasn't here. I was not here for a portion of the 40s, but I assume it continued that the sidewalks around the three churches was crowded with people walking. A lot of people walked to church, or the traffic was bad because everybody was attending church then. And we, with three churches one to the other, all with services at the same time. He kept saying, it's people still, despite the numbers were still going, it didn't deter them from going to church. And it took some effort on part of a lot of people.
So that's a big difference that you've seen.
Yeah. It's with all of the so-called mainline churches and so I think hopefully the Lord will turn that around. There'll be a renewal. We may not see it, but I'm hoping there will be one.
Me too.
Yeah. It would be just wonderful. Get rid of this division and the divisiveness and the name calling and just not a very attractive country anymore, in my judgment.
Anything else that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I think one of the questions you had was to kind of go off of what we just talked about. I think what we need committed parents to raise their kids in the church so that the next generation, like you were saying, you just went to church because that's what you did. And now that there's other options and things, it's just like we need parents that are committed to raising their kids. And like now, as a parent of two little ones, Pastor Cinda had a question on here. It said, was the church important in raising in your family? And I think maybe we could touch upon that a little bit. When you guys were parents and having kids and being a part of the church, how was that impactful or important?
Well, the two girls went to Sunday school and church with us every Sunday. There was no question of playing softball or volleyball on Sunday morning. They didn't have that option then, which was fortunate. Too bad they have that now to contend with. But it was just a way of life. You just went to church.
And that religious, the faith training that they received through the Sunday school classes and sitting and listening to the sermons and our guidance and direction as to what they should not should and shouldn't do,
Right.
and what we expected of them.
They certainly knew right from wrong.
And her daughter has been an elder in her church, and our son-in-law, her husband, was sort of the one-man Tuesday morning senior men's group guy at his church.
Oh, really?
In Maryland.
In Maryland, he did an awful lot of stuff, and finally, he's as he's growing older, because he's now in his 70s, interestingly enough. I mean, these are not. They're elder. I said to you know you're elderly. So he's backed off a little bit, but he's still. I hear from him saying, "Well, that's what happened. Had to do this, and had to do that." And I said, "Yeah, I'm aware. I know what you're talking about."
Yep.
Anything goes wrong at their church, they call Robert
Oh, wow.
to fix it.
Well, it sounds like your girls then followed the example that you had set for them.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Susan is very active in the church, does things. I think now they're not really, after Kobe, they watch the service on the computer also. They don't go to church anymore.
Well, they do some. Yeah, they do.
Sometimes
some,
they do, I guess,
No,
but
it seems to be more active down. I mean, the COVID seemed to be more of an active thing down there, and they outside of Washington D.C., but there seemed to be more of it down there.
It's making, COVID is resurfacing, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
We're seeing it around here too.
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess that here at Friendship Village, you haven't seen it so much.
Some, yes.
There's some in some other senior communities around here.
No.
So people are being cautious again.
Yeah.
Right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that you think is important for us to know, or something that you would like other people to know? Little nuggets of faith.
I think we've pretty well covered everything.
Well, I pray for the elders and you ministerial staff and elders because they've got what I think maybe is more difficult, although we did get through some difficult periods.
Mm-hmm.
I think the church has had difficult times before.
One interesting thing, we had a division in our congregation back when Arnie Frank was there, the associate pastor of women's ordination and some other issues of that nature. And session decided that, and Arnie Frank was sort of leading that division, as you recall. So. And I was at work. Miles McDonald called me and said we were going to have a meeting with Arnie that night to decide to recall his call. And Miles McDonald called me and said, "You got to moderate this meeting tonight." And I said, "Miles, I can't do that. Arnie and Jean we're in a Bible study with them,
Oh.
and we're good friends of theirs." Well, he kept after me. And finally, after about a half hour of our conversation, I finally agreed. So we did. But the meeting went very well, very smoothly, fortunately. Praise the Lord for that. And Arnie and Jean remained friends, and there was no hard feelings, fortunately, as a result of that. But so we've been through those kinds of difficult situations as well. And
I think that those things are inevitable in churches, don't you?
yes, I'm afraid so. I'm afraid that, particularly in today's atmosphere, that was not the case. Well, when I was initially growing up, of course, anything that the Roman Catholics did at St. Bernard's, we wouldn't do.
Oh.
And that was part of went back to the European
The Reformation?
and the Protestants who were under considerable
Persecution?
persecution in Europe, and many of them, that's why many of them came to,
Right.
and so the Scotch Irish and other European Protestants felt that persecution that had taken place. And there wasn't any in this country, obviously, but
Right.
that lingered through the early years of, I
That
would
makes
say,
sense.
the 30s, 40s, 50s, 20s.
That makes
30s,
sense.
Yeah,
And it's something that I hadn't thought of.
yeah.
But that does make sense.
Yeah.
So you were probably being sensitive to,
Yeah,
to
very
people's.
sensitive. Well, my mother wouldn't, if I was trying to make sure I didn't date a Catholic girl.
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I dated some Catholic boys, and my mother would have a fit. Don't date them.
No. There must have been some sort of a information line among mothers so that they knew who these women, who these girls were you might date, or boys that you might date,
That was a really big thing, wasn't it, then?
Yeah.
And there weren't a lot of intermarriages like that
No, that's right. There were none.
because the families threw a fit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we can't, that isn't such a big thing right
No.
now.
yeah.
No. Yeah.
Well, I even worked in St. Bernard's at the Catholic Church. I painted the couple of summers after when I was in college.
Oh my goodness, what did you paint?
Painted, is it the nave or the apse, the side pieces?
No,
In the
it was a sanctuary
The
ceiling.
nave
It was
is
in the
called
sanctuary, but it was
Sanctuary
a
ceiling.
side thing. There
Oh.
were 6 of us,
Yeah.
6 gals, and we painted squares. We climbed up a scaffolding and lay like Michelangelo.
Oh wow. Did you get to paint any saints?
And painted squares.
Oh, not any people.
No,
didn't-
not a scene or anything,
Okay.
just blocks of color.
Okay.
And then they had a gentleman that came and put gilt on them. And I've often wanted to go back into St. Bernard's and see what it looks like if it got damaged or if it still looks that way
you
or
should go
what.
do that. I think those are called the transepts.
Okay,
That's,
yes, I guess so.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you should go back in there
No,
and
well,
see.
you were on the main sanctuary ceiling. I once went in, and when we were going there, I once went in to see her. She's up on this scaffolding.
That was
And
very brave.
it was in the main sanctuary that you were working in.
I thought, it seemed to me like we were at the sides.
No, you were in the main, at that point, you were in the main
Well,
sanctuary. up
Wow,
on
you have
Someplace
you
up
have
high.
history. You have made your mark
the-
there.
Way up on
Wow.
the scaffolding, and that's a fairly high scaffold. Oh,
Yes, that's very
I wouldn't-
brave just to climb up there. Wow, congratulations.
So a lot of little interesting tidbits, yeah.
Well, thanks so much
Yeah.
for sharing
Well,
today. This
I
has
got
been
one more question.
Okay,
It's
sorry.
off topic, but
sorry.
as a history buff, I have to ask, where did you do basic and what was your basic experience like?
In the service,
Yeah, where did you boot camp?
well, what was called Fort Benning, and they've changed the name of it in Georgia. We had infantry, 13 weeks of infantry, so-called infantry basic. And then we went to a Camp Livingston in Louisiana, which was nothing but tar paper shacks, which we lived in. I mean, they were stable, but they were just built with tar paper on the sides for 4 weeks of advanced infantry training. And then I was assigned to this bridge building company in a camp outside of Austin, Texas, in which we trained to build these pontoon bridges, which were large rubber pontoons that we had compressors to blow them up, and then we also had the steel treads, which were that fitted on the pontoons and were they were wide enough to handle a tank tread and a truck tread. And then they hooked together with pins so that you'd put one pontoon after the other. And as I say, in retrospect, obviously we were trained to be ready to build a bridge over the Rhine River because it was getting to that point where before the invasion, before Normandy. But they knew, I'm sure they knew that the Germans would not allow any of the bridges to remain if they could destroy them, which they did. And so we went over in the town, landed in Wales, and then went to a camp waiting for that time to occur, and went to a spot near Bath in England, in southwest England, and then ultimately went over, landed at Normandy, drove through the night to the Rhine River, and then we spent the night there while the artillery fired all night long, blasting the Germans on the other side of the Rhine, and probably the cause of some of my hearing loss. But there was a loud, when the shells go off, there was a loud explosion. And you didn't know about that then. You didn't have any ear protection. The artillery guys had no ear protection. I'm sure all those guys went deaf. And then we built the bridge, and then after that we went back for resupply and went back and built a bunch of bridges over any number of rivers and in Germany. And at the end of the war, wound up almost in Salzburg, Austria, when the war ended. So we had gone that far, and built most of our bridges in Bavaria, southern Germany, and fortunately didn't lose anybody. And even though we were strafed and shelled a couple of times, but then that was so then after we went there, so after we just stayed there where we were and for a while and built it there, and then we were moved to Innsbruck, Austria, in a mountain chalet, which was really great. And then we went back to France, to what they were called cigarette camps, because they were Camp Lucky Strike, Camp Camel, which were deportation camps to come back to the United States to be refitted and head for Japan. And then while we were there, they dropped a bomb in September or August, and then Japan. So then we were sent back to Germany as occupation troops in a city called Regensburg, which was an old German city. And so we really didn't have much to do there except to just be there in case there were no problems with the Germans.
You said you went to ski school.
Oh, well, yeah, they did
wow.
offer that. Yeah, they offered it. Anybody want to go to ski school? I said, well, I had done some
Yeah.
skiing, but nothing in that sense. So we went, and they had some Austrian guys who were professional skiers trying to show us how to do. So we skied in the Alps.
It's
For a
not
week.
skied since.
And haven't skied since.
Is that right?
I found that was not my thing.
But you didn't know him then. You did not know him then,
No,
right?
no, I didn't. As I say, I came back in May of '46, and she'd completed her freshman year,
Right.
and then I took my sister and then went pick her up, and that would have been just before the 4th of July, sometime in late June probably.
Well, we
Well,
got
I
married
met her.
in '49, as soon as I graduated from college.
No.
So,
All right, one more, I promise. Last
Okay.
one. I think it's interesting because my generation grew up with 9/11, right? We all, like, I could tell you where I was,
Yeah.
what was happening, and it was the worst attack since Pearl Harbor. And you were both alive. I just want to ask, what do you remember hearing? We just got attacked at Pearl Harbor. Like, what was that like?
Well, I remember Pearl Harbor very distinctly. I was doing homework at my desk, and I had the radio on, I guess, and I heard this about Pearl Harbor being attacked. And I remember going down to my parents and saying, "Where's Pearl Harbor? What? Japan just attacked us." I just remember that very clearly.
Yeah. So it was a Sunday afternoon, and I was laying on the sofa, and I guess I had a nap, but then the radio was on. And then of course, they broke in with this news, and I heard that, and I thought, oh boy. And I was 16 at the time, and I thought, no, I'm going to be in the military probably for. And then that we were basically at that time we were losing the war. The Japanese were essentially moving all over the Pacific. The Germans had gone to almost to Moscow in Russia. They had taken over all of Europe, and so the thought was, boy, my adult life is going to be spent in the military. It was a thought that occurred to me at that point, you know, and so that fortunately that it was only 2.5 years.